This episode is brought to you by Polestar. Time is luxury, which is why Polestar spent so much time designing the Polestar 3, their luxury electric performance SUV. It's designed to go further with up to 315 miles of range and immerse you in a unique listening experience powered by 25 speakers. Your favorite daily news podcast has never sounded better. All to make the time you spend behind the wheel of Polestar 3 the best time of your day. Book your test drive at polestar.com.
This episode is brought to you by Vitamin Water. So much of what the world is obsessed with starts out in New York City. It's a place full of style and character that has something for everyone. With a range of flavors to meet any kind of taste, it's no wonder Vitamin Water was born there. Colorful, flavorful, anything but boring. Vitamin Water injects a daily dose of vibrancy into a watered-down life. Grab a Vitamin Water today. Vitamin Water is a registered trademark of Glasso.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome in. Good morning. It's Friday, July 26th on the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined, as always, by Matthew, about to be in the baby trenches, Betz.
We're here, man. 1 week away. Less than 1 week away, actually, as this show is being played and as it is released. So, yeah, we're there, man. Wild times. I really enjoyed your intro there, Kyle. That was like classic, a nice little morning segment on the radio, which I know you're a radio guy. That was like a nice little, you got coffee with Kyle coming up here at 8 a.m. And the way you introed it was just, that's pro level.
I got a sultry voice because it's 37-year-old me. I had my birthday earlier this week, and it's deeper, but also I am sipping my coffee with you, Betz.
We are. That is actually a literal fact. Happy birthday, by the way. Kyle celebrated his birthday recording the Dynasty podcast, but what else did you do for your big day?
Yeah, so I shared a little bit, but I'm just such a sucker for being introspective, where I have to reflect, I have to look back, and so my wife knows this, my parents know this, some of my friends here know this, so I try to take time every year where I go off by myself and I look back. I'm a journaler, I'm a writer. You guys know I'm a writer,
a scholar,
not just about sport. Yeah, scholar, some would say. And so I just kind of get to look back. And so I was looking back through stuff from, I don't know, one of my journals, 2018. I did find some notes from 2017 Betz where I guess I had a call with the Ballers. And your name was in my notes.
Wow.
About, we were doing something about content and trying to figure out this next little season. So it's kind of nice to look back and see what were we thinking. One of my notes is apparently I was talking to the Ballers about Charles Clay, Mr. Necessary, the tight end. Big, important stuff.
Oh, man. When we sat down to hit record today, Kyle, I did not think I would hear the name Charles Clay on this show. What a blast from the past. I remember actually in a couple of redraft leagues being like, you're right, he is necessary. I got to pick him up and play him. And he probably had, 9 points, but that was enough to be a tight end one.
That's what you needed. That's what was necessary for your team. But no, I had a good birthday dinner and dessert for the family. All I wanted for my dessert, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, because I don't like cake very much. I'm not a cake eater.
Okay.
For those Mighty Ducks fans. I wanted some chocolate chip cookies, but I need them to be slightly undercooked.
That's the only way.
And then just some ice cream on top. That's the combo I wanted for my birthday.
Nothing wrong. You won't get any arguments from me on that one.
Yeah. No, so it was a good little family celebration. Betz is going to be in the shadows for a couple of weeks. We do have some good guests coming up on the podcast, including next week. We're going to be talking about the optimizer and the theory behind the optimizer. So I have a guest coming on that has built optimizers, that has won the Millie Maker, and I think that'll be a good discussion to kind of bridge into DFS world. But we got some other stuff going into August as we talk about DFS. But Betz, you're going to be alive. It's not like we're just putting you to rest, but you're going to be a different version of yourself for the next month.
Barely, Kyle. Barely alive. Yeah, my wife and I are welcoming baby number 3 next week. So she'll be here, and then of course you got the twins. So we're gonna be in it. as they say, for the next several weeks, which is just, ideal timing as injuries are happening in training camp, as we get news all over the place. It's the perfect time, they say, to have another kid. But I'll be off for a few weeks. I'll be in the background still trying to update a little bit of best ball rankings if I can. And if there's any like major injuries, those will get updated in the UDK. But trying to take a few weeks away, recharge a little bit if we can, and get ready for week 1.
I would just love it if you get back on this podcast in a couple of weeks and you just so far behind. Like our listeners like, God, this guy's lost it. Like he doesn't know who's on anybody's team anymore. He doesn't know the trends. Like, oh, dude, what were you thinking? Kamani Vidal? That's so old news.
Oh, man. Yeah, hey, me and Kamani have a big few weeks coming up here, okay? Mr. Vidal, I've heard literally nothing about this man since he was drafted in April. So I have a big couple weeks coming up, new kid, Kamani Vidal. It's on you, brother. We need you to make some noise in camp, or everyone that has all the Kamani Vidal who's still screaming up boards is going to be in trouble. We were joking about this in Slack yesterday. It was like, I haven't heard anything about him. Have you? And everyone was like, no. And I made a statement, and I think it's factually correct. The only people talking about this man are people drafting best ball teams. That's Correct. It. What a world.
It's a good reminder that this little hive, this little sphere that you find yourself in, it kind of like bounces around of like, oh, you saw this tweet, you saw this ranking, you saw somebody mention him, and then it's just kind of in the collective thoughts. It's in the groupthink that this guy should be a round 13 pick or round 14, wherever. And it's a good reminder, if you look back at best ball rankings every single year, there are so many players that get steamed up the board just because you saw somebody else. And so a 6th-round pick in general, if we're just going to say that, not the name, not the team, is a terrible, terrible bet to make. Just terrible, just atrocious. Now, the Chargers are a little different bet, and we'll talk about that in just a second. We're going to talk about some of the players in best ball that we've gotten closing line value on, and then the ones that you and I are kind of holding our breath like, I bet wrong on this player, and we'll see how it goes. And then on this episode, we'll also get Betz' thoughts on some of the awards. So some of the markets that we kind of hold off on. We love the long shot bets in May and April where you can get these, but then we kind of hold off on some of them. We'll talk some divisional stuff, but some of the awards and just how to think about them, we'll talk about that in just a second. If you want to drop a review, I'm going to do a little giveaway. I didn't even tell you this, Betz.
Breaking news.
In honor of your child, I'm going to give away a t-shirt on a podcast. That makes sense, right?
That's all she could ever ask for.
Yeah. So if you leave a review on Apple, and we do read those, we don't really try to ask too much throughout the year to do that. I mean, I know some podcasts, like it's really, really helpful. You're like, oh, please leave a review. I thought this was a good time just while Betz is gone. If this podcast is giving you value, if you enjoy the community on Discord, if you think that for DFS you've learned to play the right way, please leave a review on Apple. We see those, and I will choose one of those and give a Ballers t-shirt out. I just got some new Ballers t-shirt swag for the boys for the school year.
Gotcha.
They're doing back to school shopping today, but nothing says back to school shopping like a 55 t-shirt. Am I right?
55! That's what every kid wants. I mean, let's be honest.
Yeah. I'm looking at the shopballers.com, by the way, if you want to go on there, shopballers.com. Andy was wearing a Fantasy Football is Cool shirt the other day. And then, of course, who could forget the Pity City shirt? Let me see if I can find that drop. But we built this city. Beautiful shirt. Also, we're not really seeing any income from that. You and I. We're not getting a royalty.
No, we're not. But we should be. And the OG listeners of this show, they know where it came from.
Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, leave a review on Apple if you want. And we'd love to give one of you guys a t-shirt if you think this podcast is giving you some value. So going into our quick question bets, we're going to talk about closing line value and some guys in the best ball market that we've felt good about, some that we've not done so well, but we're looking at a couple of different points. And when we're talking closing line value, we're just simply saying, what was the market price? What was the ADP in March, in May, and then where's it at now? So kind of a couple different seasons of when you can assess when these players were, where they were going. And let's just start off with our biggest wins. Let's start off with, giving the people what they want. that there's some players that we feel really, really good about, and there's some players that we could just be stupid fish about. So some of the wide receivers, because it's so wide receiver heavy, it can be easy to go like, oh, I was in on this guy. It's like everybody was kind of in on these wide receivers. Everybody's taking 2 or 3 early on. But I think the guys in like the round 3 range that we've just said like, man, these are really, really strong picks have been Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, those guys have moved up. I mean, not a ton because it's hard to move up a lot when you're in the first 2 rounds.
Former teammates, by the way.
Oh, true. Former Bama teammates. It's hard to move up a lot when you're in the first 2 or 3 rounds, but like relatively speaking, in the first 2 rounds, 3 rounds, a 5, 6, 7 spot jump is massive. And Jalen Waddle now almost always goes in round 2. Devonta Smith is creeping up. He's borderline, 2-3 turn type of guy now. Whereas before you could easily get round 3, round 4 back of the board, Smith and Jalen Hurts. That stack I'm not sure is going to be around very much longer. So yeah, it feels good to be getting in on those guys. Just talent-based bets on teams that we like a lot.
Yeah, in general, if you think about the best ball market, it is really hard for someone to rise because in order for somebody to rise, the people that were ahead of them in rankings or, in the ADP, like they have to fall a little bit. It's not like you can just force your way up there to a certain point. Like in the first round, it's like there's not going to be much movement. There's going to be maybe at the back of the first round. And we saw Kyron Williams be like kind of a fringe 1-2 turn guy, where now he's in the 3rd round. He's a player that I was lower on market. And it doesn't mean that like, oh, I'm taking a victory lap because I was lower on Kyron Williams. It's now saying I like where he goes. I'm totally fine with Kyron Williams as a 3rd round pick, where before he was a little different when you were going there with the 1-2 turn. George Pickens is another one of those guys that you guys have heard me talk about all summer. And I can also come in here and say, oh, look how smart I was. I was ahead of market on George Pickens. I'm now behind market. And it's at the point now where he's 39th overall.
Gotta
it's
fade
tough,
him,
man.
Right? You gotta fade him, Kyle. That's what you're saying.
No, I like George Pickens as a wide receiver 3. But if you are building and you're taking him ahead of ADP at like 34th overall in the 3rd round, like I just feel like it's a stretch now.
It's the wide receiver tax, right? That's what we're talking about here with some of these guys, which is what I was talking about last week on like our cheat code show of like some of these guys are good, fun best ball picks, but like probably should be going like the 6th round, right? Like just they're pushed up because of the landscape. And Pickens feels like that guy where, not to make the straight line comparison of like, well, look what Drake London did last year, but also look what Drake London did last year, right? And Drake London was a guy that was always going like around like the 50s, and now we're getting the wide receiver 1 for Arthur Smith on probably the lowest pass volume offense in the league. Yeah, it's tough, man. I'm happy that you and I talked about that so early because now it's at a point where I don't want to take George Pickens because I did get him a couple times when he was closer to like pick 50. So yeah, it's really hard to go there when he is that expensive.
Some quarterbacks that I feel good are in our bag. Like I'm looking at my, exposures and I go, man, we got a lot of Jaden Daniels. And now he's, basically going to be a top 100 pick every single time. He was going at 117 for a while. So Jaden Daniels, Kyler Murray, 2 of the quarterbacks that I think in our rankings it's been reflected, and hopefully you have them on your team. CJ Stroud and Joe Burrow have dropped to a place now where I feel really comfortable taking CJ Stroud. Joe Burrow, I mean, there's drafts where he's going like pick 100. Like nobody wants to take this guy, especially after what he did to his hair. So I get it, man. He's going through a lot.
Kyle saw, just for everyone that, peek behind the curtain, Kyle saw the picture, and I'm not kidding. I got a Slack notification probably 30 seconds later that Kyle moved him down in his best ball rank. So you can blame Kyle for that one. But in all seriousness, no, the reason those guys fall is twofold for me. One is we know that the pocket passers just, it's hard, right? It's hard to be a top 5, top 6 guy unless you have an outlier touchdown season. These guys both are capable of doing it, but the bets we like to make are these rushing mobile quarterbacks and, comparing like the price of where CJ Stroud was to Anthony Richardson. It's like every time I'm taking Richardson because he could finish as the quarterback 1 overall if things break right. The other reason that these guys fall is because the stacking component, right? All of the Texans guys, minus Dalton Schultz, go before Stroud. So you can push Stroud and you can kind of make him fall a little bit, and oftentimes that will be the case. Same thing with Joe Burrow. If you have Chase, and especially if you have both Chase and Higgins, most of the time on Underdog, people are sharp enough to know that you need a stack, so they're not really going to reach for an unstacked Joe Burrow. Who are you going to pair him with later? Jermaine Burton? Like that's not going to win you anything most often. So that's why those guys fall. But if you have, knowing that those guys are falling, and if you have those players, that's what I've been saying along. Like, be willing to push it because no one wants to take the unstacked quarterbacks.
How many games last year did Joe Burrow hit 20 plus fantasy points? Just take a guess.
I think he did it against the Cardinals when Jamar Chase went for 3 touchdowns. I'm going to say once.
He did it 3 times. Okay.
Go Joe.
3 times 20 plus fantasy points. Now, here's a better question. How many times did Jake Browning do it?
3.
He did exactly 3. I just, it's a little bit of a bit. People, hopefully you understand with Joe Burrow. Like, I kind of like digging into this. I think he's a very good franchise NFL quarterback. I just think when you start to break down like what you're trying to create with him, when he was being drafted as like the QB7, QB6, I think people are missing out on because he doesn't run as much as you want to. And he didn't run beginning of last year, right? Not at all. Like it was pretty atrocious.
With the calf injury.
You're going to get some dud games. And if you're drafting him as your quarterback 1 and you're doing a 2 quarterback build, like I feel a little scared with that in best ball. And so I like where he's going now, though. That's my point. Like when we're saying closing line value, we're not saying let's take a victory lap. Don't ever draft this guy. I like where Stroud and Burrow are going now, and I'm totally fine with it as kind of a backdoor stack where before it was like, I've got to condense the Texans. I got to figure out how to get all of them. Speaking of the Texans, we were head on Tank Dell over Stephon Diggs, and that's worked out pretty well. The Raiders, I'm not touching a Raider. I looked at my exposures. I have a Brock Bowers team. And that's it. Like I just didn't draft Raiders this year, and it was purposeful. And Jason brought this up as his cheat code last week. It's like I look at our projections, I look at this team, I look at where Devontae's going, and then I look at the rest of the team and go, why am I spending draft capital on a team that's probably going to be bottom 5 in a lot of categories when it comes to scoring?
Yeah, and we're going to talk updated win totals and updated divisional futures today a little bit too. And we gave out Raiders under, or at least I did. A while back, and I've just kind of followed that through to best ball. Like, I did take Devontae the other day. I'm not going to lie to you. Okay, just get this off my chest.
You're backsliding, dude.
On DraftKings, he fell to 28th overall, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to take him. And DraftKings is weird, so like, don't take a lot from that because they do silly things. But I was like, okay, this is fine. But yeah, man, round 2 player that's aging on a bad team was kind of my justification of like, just I'm going to make my bets elsewhere. And then, Zamir White is such a fun player to root for. I don't know if you saw the most recent interview he had. Country strong boy, like just talking about growing up on the farm, all those things. And a fun guy to root for.
Went to Georgia, so I'm for it.
And he went to Georgia. Fun guy to root for. But, is this team going to win a lot of games? Probably not. Is he going to catch passes? Probably not a lot. Generally, that's a pretty terrible profile to bet on in fantasy, where he is your classic dead zone. Now, in this landscape, he goes late enough that you might say, well, it's not a dead zone. But when you look at the running back ADP of like RB 15 to RB 24-ish is kind of where the dead zone usually lives. He's in it. And it's your classic bet against that guy most years. So I have taken, I think, like 2 shares all summer, and I don't plan to start.
Rookie wide receivers, Jalen Polk, you've said was a league winner. I'm coming around to the fact that if you get him as wide receiver 6, I mean, that is just free money. As you say, Betz, I'm just laughing all the way to the bank, just saying, you guys are taking Ricky Pearsall, and I'm taking Jalen Polk. And in a knife fight, I'm taking Polk. You
know what I really wish happened? I really wish that Ricky Pearsall was not on NFI with the hamstring issue.
Oh, not in the NFL?
No. I'm happy he's in the league. But currently, we could have had an unbelievable opportunity to fade this man with the Ayuk trade request. There was like a 4 or 5 day period. Ayuk requested trade. Ricky Pearsall, an hour later, goes on NFI. If he didn't have the little out tag on DraftKings, or if he didn't have, that concern, like he probably would have skyrocketed up boards. And then like 3 or 4 days later, Ayuk reports to training camp, right? So we had that little window of like, you can fade him if he comes up boards. But because of the hamstring injury, I don't think he really moved a ton. But yeah, it's just, I mean, I'm kind of saying this like half joking, but mostly serious. Like, does Juwan Jennings see more targets this year? I don't know. They paid Juwan Jennings. They've got Kittle, they've got Debo, they've got CMC, Ayuk is still there. Like, it's just so hard to see it.
Yeah. What if that would be a fun one. What about use check?
He only sees like 10 a year, right? Like he's got like one a game, maybe.
Ricky Pearsall feels like maybe my least favorite pick in general in best ball, but I also have this thing against him. Man, I've got a couple things against people.
Yeah, you need to go journal more, dude. You got to get this out of you.
That's true. All right. And then one more thing is that I feel like the injured guys, this is me leaning into Betts' expertise, but like you see the market and the way that it falls. And then there's this point where people go, oh, maybe there is a value. So, TJ Hawkinson was a player we just had much lower. Nick Chubb is now currently rising because of videos.
The man can squat. I
love it.
It's impressive. I mean, for a player with that.
George is strong, man.
These guys are strong, man. For a player with this injury to be doing that, it is a sign of like, okay, yeah, like his knee's accepting a lot of weight. It's impressive. His strength is starting to come back. But just like if we just take a step back, and people do not do this, but every time people see stuff, they're like, okay, let's adjust. He's moved up a ton. I was in a DK draft last night. He went 101st overall. So people are adjusting to the news, or quote unquote news, the video. But we do this every year, right? Like 2 years ago, it was like, okay, J.K. Dobbins came off the pup in training camp. Like, let's take him. And I was like, what are we doing? Javonte Williams, he played in the preseason. He's going to be fine. Start screaming up boards. We do this every year. And this injury is more severe than those for a guy that's late in his career. So I get it. I get wanting to bet on a success story and an outlier, and it's fun. And I love Nick Chubb. It's just a bet I'm going to make against for fantasy and for best ball. So yeah, I've taken him 0 times, and especially with the costs changing, I still plan to take him 0 times as he gets more expensive.
Yeah, and this is a good point for next year, just to, if you want to write this down in your journal, is just that in general, when you get to May, you're not going to miss out on these injury guys. They're going to drop in ADP. And so you can kind of wait till we get news if you want to, but like Nick Chubb, Mike Williams, another player that's like, we've been pretty hands off. And then we got the news recently. It's like, okay, well, he's going to keep dropping. J.K. Dobbins, Keaton Mitchell, those are all kind of players that we've been much lower on. Now, all of that sounds like we're sniffing our own farts. Let's flip the tables and talk about some players really quickly before we get into the main segment. Biggest losses. So Antonio Gibson is the player that I've associated like, hey, I made a bet and I was wrong. I did not think that they would re-sign a 26-year-old running back in his contract year. It just didn't make sense to me. But, and then he just went on the NFI, but he goes where he was going before. So it's not like he like dropped like 4 rounds or anything. Antonio Gibson goes where he goes, and it is what it is. Like if he's your running back 5, it's not the worst thing in the world, but that's definitely a loss on my part.
Yeah, he feels a lot to me like, maybe not the same, but like kind of like Tyler Algier, where it's like, he's the RB2. If Ramondre goes down, he's probably the guy. Not as good of an offense, obviously. But he could have still, I think, a little bit of standalone value. But obviously the contract is one we were betting against. I was surprised, too, that they signed him to an extension just given the state of where they are. Like where you allocate your funds for a rebuilding team is usually not to sign a running back who in NFL years is closer to the end than the beginning. That's a conversation for another day. But yeah, taking the L on Gibson, I'm shocked for one that it hasn't worked out 3 years in a row.
Hey, 40 plus receptions each year. I don't know if he's going to get to that this year, but, pass catching work, we'll see. Drake London, we were ahead of the curve. Very much ahead. When we get to the awards market, we were very much ahead. And now we are left in the dust, my friend, to look at draft boards and go, oh, Drake London's like a borderline, 1-2 turn kind of guy.
Not borderline. That's where he lives, brother. Yeah, if you want him, you got to pay the tax, and it feels terrifying.
Yeah, and I think our biggest losses, and I'm not saying like we're wrong or that this was dumb, it's just more of like we held our ground in our rankings, and yet the rest of the market kept moving up. And so you got to recognize that and say, okay, are we going to keep our stance or are we going to go with ADP? And a lot of times we use the ADP as a guide, but for some of these players, Zay Flowers, you and I have kind of held serve and saying, hey, we have him ranked where we have him ranked. He's now going 36 overall. I get it. Second year breakout. We could be very, very wrong on Zay Flowers when, we've been very much team Mark Andrews as their wide receiver 1. We're like, I have Andrews ahead of Flowers in my rankings. So that's reflected there. Hollywood Brown, dude, people have just said, I'm sticking to this, and we could be very, very dumb, but I've stayed steady of like, I can't see it.
He feels like the one guy this year that could absolutely bury us. Like if
if
Hollywood comes out and has an awesome year, I might not be having fun this year. Yeah, it's tough, right? Like we talked about it at length. Like we both see the path where he crushes. It's obviously a Pat Mahomes team that we've talked about is due for positive regression. I think Mahomes is a good chance to finish as a top 3 quarterback, and he's bringing his boys with him. But it's just a tough bet when the numbers from Brown have been so bad recently. And I think a lot of the reason Marquise Brown got pushed up was twofold. One, like the Chiefs thing, obviously, but Rashee Rice, right? We're like, oh, he's getting suspended, no questions about it. And now as we get closer and closer and closer, I'm like, is this getting pushed back to 2025? And if it does, then Marquise Brown's ADP looks silly, in my opinion, because I would take Rashee Rice over him. I would take Rashee Rice over Xavier Worthy if we knew Rice wasn't getting suspended. Like classic year 2 breakout, we saw it as a rookie, and that's still a moving part, and you got to kind of, make your bets in those situations. But I've started to just hammer Rashee Rice because I'm feeling like he's not getting suspended, man. We'll see. But lots of moving parts in KC.
And then just a couple more here. I feel like I'm talking really long on the intro, but I also realize like this is me trying to like soak out the last little bits of just talking to you. Because then you're gone. you're dead.
Let's just make this a 3-hour show.
Little 3 hours just on closing line value. Here's where we were right. Here's where we were wrong. Josh Palmer, I just made sure to check this, is now going 100th overall. That is I know. And I'm saying that because I don't have a ton of Josh Palmer. I didn't mind where he went earlier.
You have all
but
the
now
QJ.
It's so hard to click Josh Palmer. Another player that's just so boring to pick.
I think he's fine. Especially
that's what I'm saying, though.
If you want to...
Do you get excited to click?
No, of course not. But if
Does this spark joy? The Marie Kondo method.
I actually immediately have regrets every time it happens. But I think he's a fine pick, man. I mean, like, if you need a wide receiver 4, if you got behind, right? If you're like, I went wide receiver early and then, oh man, I got quarterback values, I got tight end values, there's a running back I wanted to take, and all of a sudden you're looking at the board and you're like, I need a wide receiver. He makes a lot of sense, especially if you pair him with rookies where you're like, okay, I can get some early season production from Palmer. Maybe he starts out ahead of Ladd and then your rookies come on late. Like, I think he's a good pick for that, or like a Rashee Rice injury suspension risk, or like an injury risk you took, like those kind of things. That's where I like to take Josh Palmer.
Where do you think Josh Palmer was going in March?
129.
Keep going, brother.
139.
Keep going, brother.
150.
Keep going, brother.
160.
167.
That's wild.
In March. Yeah. So it's one of those, I mean, this before the draft, I understand it's just so hard to think about this being a player that can make a difference for your team when there are, like, it could really be huge. It could really be Ladd McConkey.
Could it?
I think it could in terms of Final Fantasy points.
You think it could be huge?
I think he could have more touchdowns.
Yeah, I guess. We'll see.
Anyway, so those are some of the biggest closing line value guys that we've been talking about, biggest wins, biggest losses. Hopefully you got to ride with us. If you want to, that'd be a really good exercise to do. Look at your teams, kind of say like, okay, here's what I've been ahead of market. Here's what I've been behind. Realize that everybody's playing the same thing too. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Introducing the ultimate bundle at an unbeatable price. The Disney Plus Hulu Max Bundle. With iconic entertainment like Loki and Encanto on Disney Plus.
I will save the magic.
FX's The Bear and the Kardashians on Hulu.
I am a good time, okay?
And The Last of Us and House of the Dragon on Max.
They are a protector of the realm.
All available with the Disney Plus Hulu Max Bundle. Plans starting at $16.99 a month. Terms apply. Visit DisneyPlus HuluMaxBundle.com for details. Introducing the ultimate bundle at an unbeatable price. The Disney Plus Hulu Max Bundle. With iconic entertainment like Loki and Encanto on Disney Plus.
I will save the magic.
FX's The Bear and the Kardashians on Hulu.
I am a good time, okay?
And The Last of Us and House of the Dragon on Max.
They are a protector of the realm.
All available with the Disney Plus Hulu Max Bundle. Plans starting at $16.99 a month. Terms apply. Visit Disney Plus Hulu MaxBundle.com for details.
We're going to shift gears, and Betz and I are going to talk through some win totals, some divisional stuff, and some awards. Some of it we'll just update from our win totals spectacular episode, which, by the way, everything we said in that episode, everything that we talked about still holds true. I mean, that was, let me look at this, May 17th. I mean, what evergreen content could you find like that?
Doesn't exist anymore, Kyle.
All the player takes, everything else. But no, we'll update some of that. We'll talk about it. So let's get into it.
I thought you were trying to lose weight.
Lay off me, I'm starving.
Had to go deep in the bag for that one, my friend.
Yeah, I haven't heard that in a long time.
You know, it's still something that brings me joy to bring out the drops just for Betz and the listening folk, and hopefully you had fun with that. So let's first talk about win totals briefly. We'll spend the most time on awards. We've talked about scheduled adjusted wins a lot, and I'm really proud of myself, Betz, because on the main Ballers show, maybe you've heard of it, when we go through the divisional previews now, Jason will make sure to mention, oh, this team has a first place schedule this year. Here are the 3 games they added. I mean, that feels great that like just over the years, like, hey, this is important. Let's talk about it. And now people know. So like there's teams with really tough first place games like Tampa Bay. It's like, oh man, this is really tough. So schedule adjusted wins matter a lot. And it's nice to see some of those things reflected. For instance, Baltimore, their win total started off at 11.5. And we say in general, that is just a really high total. Schedule adjusted wins said 10.5. And guess what, Betz?
Moving the lines.
You dog.
Just doing my job. Just reporting for work, doing my job like I said I would. But they're now at 10.5, and it's about right. I feel scared. I'm not going to bet that team at all. But the Bills, same way. The Bills are a team that you look at their schedule, it's scary, and now their under is reflected, minus 155. The Rams are the opposite. The Rams are one of the most bet teams on their over. And I think you were the one that found that statistic, Betz, of like all the teams that people are betting the overs on. It's wild how much money is being thrown at overs.
Yeah, it's like, I forget the stat, but it was like the top like 12 or 13 as far as like ticket count and money totals on certain teams. And it's all the teams, the public that we love. Like it's the Bills, it's the Eagles, it was the Texans, it's like all those teams. And 80+% of the money was all on the over for every single team. And that's just human nature. Like people like to root for things, people don't like to root against them. But when those lines don't really move, it tells you kind of a lot in terms of the Vegas feels pretty good about where they're at. So yes, just be careful with overs. That's why we try to lean into unders when it makes sense, because for an over to hit, so much has to go right. For an under to hit, one injury can make that happen, right? Like if Josh Allen goes down, the Bills are not winning 11 games, kind of thing. So it's just tough to see the overs.
Yeah, and hopefully you've been getting some of our season-long props. Betz gets to alert people in our Discord channel. We've been taking unders, I feel like almost every day over the last week, where it's like, hey, let's just hammer another under here. We did take an over, spoiler alert.
I almost got sick.
It's fun. It's a fun one to take. But yeah, we're mostly taking unders just because there's so many things that can go wrong. So in that win total show we had back in May, we gave out some lines. So tell me the ones that we gave out that we felt strongest about, and if you feel the same exact way 3 months later.
Yeah, so I think our officials so far have been Washington under 6.5, the Raiders under 6.5, Houston under 9.5. I think we got that at plus 120. The Niners under 11.5, and then Pittsburgh under 8.5. I still feel pretty good about those. Not much has changed in any of the teams. I did see a report that Washington in the first couple days was splitting first team reps with Jaden Daniels and Marcus Mariota.
Dan, you were an idiot.
So I feel even better about that.
Oh,
why do teams
hat
do
Dan.
this, man? Rookies need all the work they can get in camp to set themselves up for success. Marcus Mariota is not starting games for you, so you're wasting your time. That's a conversation for another day.
Yeah. He watched quarterback, and he saw Mariota did that work that he put in. Dan Quinn's like, okay, he used to be a Falcon, and he's connecting the dots here.
Obviously.
Dan Quinn understands, man.
He gets it.
Yeah, no, that one, I felt same thing. I saw that news. I was like, wow, I feel even better about Washington under 6.5. And I gave a whole article about the early under of the Commanders if you want that one. Pittsburgh's been another team that's been even stronger. It's now at minus 160 on the under. So that one feels pretty good. I did have an over that I mentioned on that show that has moved in the right direction, and I feel really good about it, and it's the Colts. The Colts have been a team in best ball that I've just kind of been all in on. We love Shane Steichen. This was a team that won 9 games last year, if I'm correct. And
sounds correct.
with Gardner Minshew, like they got there just on just pure like Shane Steichen like style. The defense was really bad, gave up a ton of big plays, and I just really like the Colts for a lot of different reasons and their schedule. So they're over 8.5 wins. We took it at plus 105. I did, and it's now at minus 105.
Love that. Let me see. Colts record in 2023. I am monologuing.
A live Google from Betz.
Hold
a live
on.
Google.
9-8.
There you go. And then Seattle's another team that I don't mind their over. It's now at minus 135, but 7.5 wins. I feel like Seattle's another team that I'm kind of buying in overall. I always think about this because of at this point of the offseason, we're looking at projections. We're looking at the team makeup. You and I for best ball looking at, okay, Geno Smith is going, in this round, and I can kind of get him as this backdoor stack, and here's the value. And this team was paced up last year. They were 11th in yards per play, but dead last in time of possession. That's not going to hold. There's all those factors, and yet it's still a new offense. It still has to click. It still has to work. But Seattle's a team that I would lean into their over.
And a first-time NFL play caller, which could be great, or we've seen those guys fall on their face too. So there's a lot of volatility with Seattle, which is why I prefer to lean into markets like best ball and that kind of thing if I'm going to invest in them to get those higher-end payout structures and outcomes. Same with the Colts. Like, I get the Colts. I'm in on the Colts. I'm taking Richardson a ton. We love Shane Steichen. I would just prefer to play that where you're probably getting a huge payoff. We'll talk about it for MVP, or Offensive Player of the Year or something like that. So I get those. I like those. I'm just going to play them differently personally.
Speaking of, the Colts for the divisional crown, I think is my favorite bet for them. They're at plus 310 right now to win the AFC South. And there's only a couple divisional ones that I would really bet right now, but I could totally see that changing midseason. A lot of times I'll bet a couple before the season divisional, and then halfway through you'll get some values and you look at the schedule and go, okay, I can see this team turning things around, or I like their end of season schedule. But the Colts in the AFC South right now are behind the Jaguars and behind the Texans for that. So how do you feel about the Colts to win the AFC South?
Yeah, I think that's another way to play it, right? We're in on Texans under, and I don't know if you want to hit on that, Kyle, but basically we just think, Stroud was awesome, and we think he can take a step forward in year 2, especially with the addition of Diggs. But a lot of his numbers as far as like turnover rate and, adjusted completion percentage type stuff was just otherworldly, and historically that will come down in efficiency. And so there's just more variance that can happen. So if we think that's in the range of outcomes for them to only win 9 games, maybe 8 games, then like someone else is taking a step forward here, presumably, right? So this is why I like betting this instead of Indy over 8.5, because it's kind of a correlated bet and you're getting a better payout. So at plus 310, I think the Colts are a really good value. They almost won the division last year with Gardner Minshew, a backup quarterback, and Shane Steichen in his first year as a head coach. So I like it. I'm in on the Colts, like I said, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the Colts have Warren Sharp's 7th easiest schedule. They also had the 7th most games lost to injury. And year to year, injury is one of the things we can't forecast. And it's part of what you look at in retrospect and say, okay, how did this team perform in spite of what they had to do? And same thing with the Texans. Like, their offensive line was the most injured in the league. So you can look at improvement there. But the schedule for the Texans is much harder than maybe people realize. Their first place games are against Baltimore, at Kansas City, at Dallas. Warren Sharp's 7th hardest schedule. And just a couple of odd things about the Texans I just want to bring up. They did a really good job taking care of the ball. Number 1 in turnovers per drive, which is crazy for a rookie quarterback. People know by now, you and I have been CJ Stroud guys through and through. He's our number 1 quarterback last year. But they were 29th in time in possession. And year over year, that just isn't something that's repeatable with the efficiency and the turnovers. and they made some big splashes at defense. So I think there is reason this team will change their makeup, though. They're not going to run the same hard-nosed. I mean, they ran 21 personnel 30% of the time last year. So it's going to be 3 wide. There is going to be a little bit of adjustment out there. So I'm just going to lean into what the market, I think, is not factoring in that the Colts are just as good a team, and they might be a little bit more well-rounded in some ways, especially when you think about the offensive line. So I like the Colts at plus 310, and I wanted to quickly just bring up the AFC East and get your assessment on this market because it's pretty close. Like the Bills at plus 170, the Jets at plus 190, and the Dolphins at plus 200. Sorry, Patriots fans, we're not considering you here. So do you have any takes on this division? Because I like the under on the Bills win total. They have a pretty tough schedule, and I think there's value here. I like the Dolphins are my favorite value if I just had to pick on just any team in this division.
Yeah, the Bills, just to speak to their schedule, they got the 10th most difficult, according to Warren Sharp's numbers. And then also looking at this defense, I didn't realize how much they lost on the defensive side of the ball. Their front seven dealt with some injuries last year. Von Miller should be back, but he's 35, and we haven't really seen it in a long time. Second year off the ACL, so he should be healthier. But like they've got some pass rush concerns, and they lost all 4 starters in the secondary, so they're losing a ton. Not to mention Steph Diggs, not to mention Gabe Davis. So like you just have a whole new look team basically. And the way that the Bills win the division, which is certainly possible, is Josh Allen is just Superman, and he just puts the team on his back and he does it. But that's very volatile and sometimes not as likely to happen. And that's what had to happen last year down the stretch, right? Remember the middle part of the year, this team was like, they're not going to make the playoffs. And then Allen went on a run and they were incredible. So you need that to happen all year, in my opinion. And I think that's pretty volatile and unlikely. So I would not be betting the favorites here. Obviously not the Patriots. So for me, I don't have a strong take on Dolphins versus Jets, but I think those are pretty fair prices.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember on this podcast, this award-winning DFS and betting podcast, one of the hosts said, "Hey, let's take the Bills under like halfway through the year. They're at 5-5. It's like they got to go on an insane run. They got to win like 6 out of the last 7 games. They're changing offensive coordinators. This doesn't look good. They do it. They go 6-1. They make me look stupid. But I've talked before, Joe Brady is one of those guys that I will bet against. When you think of the variance and how this team did win, of just having the ball a lot, not throwing the ball a lot, and then you mentioned it, the defense, they were number 1 in turnover rate. Year over year, that might be the least stickiest thing, and cornerback play is one of the things that's the most volatile in the league. Like it really is year over year. If you look at a defense's metrics and go, okay, well, their cornerbacks were awesome, they'll be good again. It changes a ton. They actually were 24th in explosive pass rate, 26th in explosive rush rate, and yet they didn't give up a ton because they were good inside the red zone. So I think the Bills are a team. I love Josh Allen. I love James Cook. I think James Cook's my favorite player on this team. I like Dalton Kincaid where he goes, but I just in general will be betting against this team having the same type of success and just assuming that this is the same defense. That's just not how it works in the NFL when you take a zoomed out approach. So I won't, it's more of me saying I think the Bills are the favorite, but they're not a favorite that I want to bet on at all this year for this market. So I think it looks better. I like the Dolphins better than the Jets. So plus 200, I think is fine. I wish it was a little bit better.
Yeah, same.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to spend the rest of this episode talking awards.
This episode is brought to you by EA Sports College Football 25. From the Big House to the Swamp, from Tuscaloosa to College Station, experience the decibel-shaking soundscape of college football while testing yourself across strategic, fast-paced, authentic college football gameplay. Bring glory home. Learn more about the MVP Bundle, which also includes EA Sports Madden NFL 25 and can't miss rewards at ea.com/college bundle.
This episode is brought to you by Alien Romulus. On August 16th, the most terrifying movie of the summer, Alien Romulus, is coming to theaters everywhere, including IMAX. And fear is bigger in IMAX. Alien Romulus comes from Fede Alvarez, director of horror sensations Evil Dead and Don't Breathe. It's produced by filmmaking legend Ridley Scott, who's behind iconic films like Blade Runner and the original Alien. Alien Romulus, rated R. In theaters everywhere August 16th. Get your tickets now.
Okay, we're back, and we're going to talk through a couple different awards. We're going to talk about MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, which has been a very good award for us in the past, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Comeback Player, go through those. So, Betz, you're going to get to explain some of the trends of these awards to kind of narrow it down, and then we're going to play a little game where we figure out if we can read each other's minds, have the mind meld. We've been recording years and years together, and figure out if we're on the same page with some of these guys. And at this point in the offseason, you could really make the case for almost anybody, okay? I mean, really, get on Twitter.
Not really.
Okay, I'm going to give you a guy right now. Give me the case for Russell Wilson.
It doesn't
plus
exist.
10,000.
It doesn't exist.
The limit does not exist. Okay, so give me some trends, and then there are a couple names, though, that I think you and I will hopefully land on together.
Yeah, we've talked about this the last couple of years. MVP is now a quarterback award, and last year, if it was not going to be anymore, like last year was the year where it's like, we talked about it right down the stretch. It was like a lot of these guys are playing really well, but the quarterbacks aren't separating themselves like they normally do. And CMC and Tyreek still didn't win the award. So we pretty much only are looking at quarterbacks here, and you'll see that reflected in the market. Since 2000, a quarterback has won it 21 of 25 times going back to that year. And that includes 11 years in a row. So I'm just betting quarterbacks, not wasting my money elsewhere. And looking at kind of like what it takes for these quarterbacks to win, the average team wins in a season going back to 2010, 13. So we're talking about you need team success, you need double-digit wins, you need to either win your division or have the 1 seed. Like you're looking at just the teams that can actually do that. So that's why I'm not really wasting money on guys like Russell Wilson or Baker Mayfield or, Deshaun Watson, like those kind of guys, because it's just, you need so much to go right. You should be betting quarterbacks of the best teams in the league. And you're not getting as much payout as you used to because the market has come around to that and the odds makers have come around to that. But this is not an award where we like to go way down the board and look at those numbers. I also looked at EPA per play. Every quarterback that has won the award going back to that 2010 season ranked in the top 8 in EPA per play, and 11 of the 13 winners were either first or second in EPA per play. So there's a strong correlation with EPA.
It's really hard when I want to make the case of like, oh man, this is a screaming value, because I love Kyler Murray this year. 13 wins, double-digit wins would be insane. It would be great. And I think the Cardinals are a team that's underrated in a lot of different ways. I think their defense can be better than what you think. We saw how good they were in EPA per play down the stretch. At plus 5,000, that's tempting from just he's way down there. That's somebody who could do it. But as a team, I think they're not quite there yet.
Yep.
But I think the ones that stand out to me is, I don't think he's just a good value. I think that Jalen Hurts can win this award. I think this is a good team. I like the offense. And I did want to get your perspective. Your boots on the ground there. You understand. You got you got the pulse on this team. Was Nick Sirianni calling plays last year?
There was a report about that, or like a rumor about that.
That's what...
I don't know, honestly. And I feel like maybe it was, based off how rough it went. Yeah, I don't know, man, honestly.
There's a report that came out recently. So Brian Johnson got fired. It was very predictable down the stretch. That's kind of the narrative. And then they bring in Kellen Moore, and Kellen Moore is going to be the guy calling the plays. It's like, he didn't just come in to like, let's talk theory and you call everything Nick Sirianni. It is weird, I just want to say, for a head coach, an offensive head coach, to, one, not be the play caller, and then if he was calling plays or was sharing it 50-50, that's kind of been the report. It's like they went back and forth, that it was bad. Like so it's almost like, okay, so what is he there for if you're not? Like Kyle Shanahan is not going to be an offensive-minded head coach and then not be a play caller too. It's just like what he is.
Sean McVay. Shane Steichen,
Yes.
all those guys.
And there's obviously like collaboration. That's why McVay people and Shanahan people like get jobs elsewhere. Like they can call plays. But what is Nick Sirianni doing is really my question. If he's not. All of that to say, I like the Eagles and I like Jalen Hurts. He's at plus 1,500 right now.
Yeah, 16-1 on MGM if you want a little bit of a better price over there. You look at kind of the benchmarks we looked at, right? Like, can this team win 11, 12, 13 games? Their win total's at 10.5. The over is minus 130. They've got the ninth easiest strength of schedule, according to Warren Sharp. They're the favorites to win the NFC East. They're minus 230 to make the playoffs. So obviously the betting markets are in on the Eagles as having success this year. And Jalen Hurts is a guy that we've seen him play at a very high level. Obviously down the stretch last year, it was atrocious, but we're buying back into the Kellen Moore experience with up in pace, up in tempo, give Hurts more play action, give him more pre-snap motion, give him some layup throws in the middle of the field. I think you're going to see a way more efficient and healthy Jalen Hurts this year. This team obviously adds another weapon in Saquon Barkley. It's just all there. And they also have the second easiest net rest advantage, according to Sharp as well. And that's been historically tied to team success and team wins. So a lot to like about Jalen Hurts. It's not a massive, massive value. It's not fun when you're like, oh, I got, it's 16-1. Like it's not like a 50-1, but it's a bet I think that we think is a good chance to be one that looks better in 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, and obviously all the guys that are going ahead of him, you should be able to make the case. Lamar Jackson won it last year. Jordan Love could easily repeat in that, 5.5% touchdown rate. He ends up with 35 passing touchdowns. They win the division. That happens. Jared Goff's kind of interesting to me at plus 2,200 just because we know this is a team that can win. And if he has an outlier touchdown season, like, last year it was like Gibbs and David Montgomery getting double-digit touchdowns. If it swings a little bit more, Jameson Williams is alive for this team, and they're kind of a more complete offense than if Jared Goff has 35 passing touchdowns, they win 12, 13 games. That wouldn't be shocking if he's in the mix.
Yeah, I think they're going to win a ton of games. The issue for me, though, with Goff is like when you look at how the public views him, like I don't know that the public thinks like this is Jared Goff's team and he's the reason for their success. If you get in the minds of the voters, which I'm not saying is right or wrong, I just think like public sentiment, it's like the Dan Campbell team. And like, I think a lot of public people just view Goff as like the game manager of a really good team, which is tough. I don't think he's that. I think he's been awesome in the system. But just when you think about how the voters think, that's my only hesitation.
Yeah, I can see the narrative progressing as this guy was traded here. It's Siberia. Then he got the contract extension. Then he got the whole city behind him. Now look at him. He's got 35 passing. Like, there's ways to spin the narrative.
Yeah, true.
If this team has the best record in the NFC. I would bet against that. And I think that there's ways that you can defend Jared Goff, but this team has so many weapons that it doesn't really matter. Anthony Richardson's the one that we like the most. And some people are hearing us like, dude, 4 games, really? That's what you guys are basing this off of? We could say the same thing. Mahomes had 1 game played in his rookie year. Lamar Jackson didn't come on, and yet they both won the MVP in their second year. There's so much unknown with him that at his price right now, plus 3,000, or you can get him at 40-1 on FanDuel, I think that there's enough here that says like, okay, I could see this. And we're just higher on the Colts.
Yeah, and this is what I was talking about when we were talking about the win total. I would just rather play this and say, like, if you're betting on the Colts to win 9, 10, 11, really tail end outcomes, 12 games, like, presumably it's because Richardson stayed healthy and smashed. And you're getting a huge payout in this structure, in this format to do that, instead of just taking over an 8.5. So that's my rationale. I did play this on FanDuel. Yeah, 40-1, fun price. That, is he likely to win? Of course not, but that's why you're getting this price. But when you look at his archetype and how he plays, if he is just what we saw in the first month of the season before the shoulder injury, and Shane Steichen is that good of a head coach and play caller as we think he is, I think you're going to have a lot of success not only for the team, but for Richardson. And to me, he is going to be, especially in the public's eyes, the catalyst of that happening, right? So really easy comp to make because of how they play and how they have won the award. But like Cam Newton won an MVP, right? And people don't think Cam Newton's the best passer in the world. That team won a ton of games. He ran for a bunch of yards. He ran for a bunch of touchdowns. Like, kind of sounds like Richardson to me. So a wide open division too, like we just talked about that. It makes a lot of sense. And this price to me is just I think a little bit incorrect. I would make it closer to, I don't know, 30 to 1, 25 to 1, something like that. 40 to 1 is massive value on FanDuel.
All right, so let me give you a couple of stats with him. You tell me if this is enough to win MVP. Let's say he doesn't hit 25 passing touchdowns. Like he gets 24.
Let me pull up Cam Newton's numbers the year he won it.
What if he ran for like 800 yards, though, on top of that?
If he can push for 800 to 1,000, yeah.
What if he only had like 5 rushing touchdowns?
Okay, wow. Cam Newton threw for 35 touchdowns?
Yeah, his was a crazy outlier.
I don't remember that at all.
Okay, the reason why I'm ballparking these numbers, and I'm giving you some... Last year, Lamar Jackson won this award with 24 passing touchdowns, 821 rushing yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns. He didn't play in Week 18, and it was a record thing. And so I think it's really hard for us to stretch the Colts into 12 wins, 13 wins. We're not saying that. But it's an award that is spun in a couple different ways. Like pure statistics sound awesome. 40 passing touchdowns, you're pretty much there. But you can get there with 25. You can get there if, your team has a crazy outlier year. So I just want to make sure we realize like Anthony Richardson doesn't need 40 combined touchdowns. I mean, Lamar had 29 combined touchdowns last year, and it was kind of a down year overall for MVP. He's not going to complete 67% of his passes like Lamar did. But all right, let's go to Offensive Player of the Year. This has been a bread and butter spot for us. I mean, I have cut the bread. You've buttered it. People love it. Give me some trends for Offensive Player of the Year.
Oh, man. And, dude, it would have been fun to go back-to-back with this one, with CeeDee Lamb. That was the right play, It was.
Can I tell you that I think about this daily?
Yeah, I do too.
Legitimately.
I do too.
Legitimately, CeeDee Lamb's 2023 season was just born in the wrong year. Because
if he does that this year, he's winning the award.
If he did that the year that Justin Jefferson, he would have beat Justin Jefferson for the award.
Yeah.
He was better than
Kyle.
better than Justin Jefferson, and yet it is what it is.
Anyway. Okay, so the trends for this one, since 2010, a tight end has never won the award, sadly.
Man.
This used to be a running back quarterback award for years, and my theory on that is, like, if you go back to like the 2000s and like that kind of thing, that's the only positions that would win. My theory is the NFL is clearly changing. We see way more pass volume, and so you are seeing wide receivers emerge as guys that can win the award and have won the award, especially recently. A quarterback has won this 6 times since 2010, so again, they can win it, but they haven't won it in 5 years, and you've kind of seen that flip with the MVP market of like, okay, quarterbacks, you take MVP, running backs and wide receivers, like you take Offensive Player of the Year. So I personally don't bet a ton into quarterbacks in this market, not saying you shouldn't or can't, it's just kind of my philosophy. I lean into more of the running backs and wide receivers, and kind of what we're looking for. I went back to those 2010 seasons all the way through to this past year and looked at the skill players that won and like kind of what are we looking for from like a statistical output standpoint. We are looking for team success. So, the running backs that have won it, it's been CMC, Derrick Henry, Todd Gurley, Adrian Peterson. Wide receivers were Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Michael Thomas. Each one of the teams that those guys played for won 10 plus games. So you do need team success. So I'm kind of knocking off Patriots guys, Panthers guys, you can kind of knock players off the list somewhat quickly. So we need team success. For wide receivers, the guys that have won this, all 3 led the NFL in targets, receptions, and receiving yards. All 3 categories each 3 year. Now Cooper Kupp had the outlier 16 touchdowns. You don't necessarily need that, but you do need massive target share, massive reception total, and pushing for like 1,600 to 2,000 yards is kind of what you need. For running backs, like I said, these guys also have success. You're looking for double-digit rushing touchdowns. You're looking for somewhere around 1,500 yards in the range of outcomes rushing, and an absolute workhorse, right? CMC, Henry, Gurley, Peterson. So those have been the winners. That's kind of what we looked at in the data. And now the key is trying to match that with team success and finding this year's winner, Kyle, because we hit on Jefferson 2 years ago. I'm going to say we basically hit on CeeDee Lamb last year. Yes. That was pain. So who is it this year?
I mean, I liked where we got what we got. I mean, I hate bringing up Falcons because no one's going to listen to me anymore.
I'll bring up Falcons.
But I love Bijan. And I think Bijan can have an outlier season.
I think Bijan's a great bet because right now, when you look at the market using DraftKings numbers, like Tyreek and CMC are the favorites, then CeeDee Lamb, like they deserve to be. They're obviously capable of doing this. But you scroll down a little bit and like Bijan goes in terms of his odds behind Saquon. Like there's so many guys competing with touches and volume, especially rushing touchdowns and Jalen Hurts with Saquon that I think that price is wrong. I would have Bijan over him. So I think Bijan at 20-1 on DK is a relative value. Awesome as a receiver last year. We saw that. And that was with a somewhat incompetent combination of quarterbacks. Also, quarterbacks that could run. Now you get Kirk Cousins off the Achilles standing in the pocket, checkdowns, plus a massive boost in his touchdown output, given the fact that Arthur Smith is gone and Cordell Patterson is gone and Jonnu Smith is gone, which is crazy to even say out loud. But those factors do matter. And we tend to see running backs in year 2 have the biggest leap in their production in terms of their volume and touches. I think 20-1 on Bijan makes a lot of sense.
I like A.J. Brown. If you're betting on Hurts to have an outlier season, maybe A.J. I mean, there was a point last year where A.J. Brown was wide receiver 1, like for the first,
I think, the betting
weeks.
favorite at one point.
Yeah. So A.J. Brown at, I think he's fine.
Yeah,
40
to
4,000. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts of other guys? I find it really hard. I start scrolling down. I'm like, I can't make the case for some of these guys.
Yeah, just real quick. We took Drake London. We gave this out in Discord in like March.
Oh, man.
We were like, I think they're signing Kirk Cousins. Kyle's like, yeah, I think they might too. Okay, cool. We took him at 100-1. He's now up to 50-1.
Moving the lines.
I mean, whatever. If you have that ticket in your pocket, you just buy whatever you want right now. This baby's cashing. No, he's not going to win. But I don't think I'd bet it anymore. But we got that long shot. I also think Garrett Wilson is super interesting on FanDuel. He's 35-1. That's a really long price for a guy that we know, and Kyle's a hater, but we know is insanely talented. Insanely talented.
The price.
Could he see 170 targets this year? With that group there, with Malachi,
he could see 200 targets.
No kidding. Genuinely, I think he could. With Malachi Corley and Mike Williams as like his primary competition for targets, Mike Williams off the ACL. Garrett Wilson to me is a screaming value on FanDuel. I think he's my favorite play based off of the current market over there. I would not play on DraftKings. You're getting a shorter price, but on FanDuel, 35-1 looks pretty sweet.
Yeah. No, I like that one a lot in terms of like consolidation of targets. If he gets 175 to 190, 200 targets, he's going to end up with a crazy receiving line. And then you just pair that with comeback player of the year.
Yeah. And
with
then
Aaron Rodgers.
You double dip with Rodgers.
Yeah. The long shot you have on here is fun. Devon Achane.
I wanted to get your thoughts on it. Like, is that just wasting your money, or do you see a path?
That's wasting your money.
Okay, that's fine. I haven't taken it yet. I was waiting to talk to you today about it, but in my head, I was like, man, year 2 player, great offense, but with Tyreek and Waddle and Raheem, like,
how many touches is this dude gonna get?
I don't know, man. That's what we're all trying to figure out, aren't we?
That's what I'm saying. Like, even if Mostert gets hurt, they're still gonna mix in Jalen Wright and the boys,
Maybe.
Jeff and
okay,
everybody else.
Well, I'm glad I put that on there for us to talk about.
Oh, fun, super fun. But I 60-1, tempting. Little sprinkle in there.
Yeah, a little launch money.
All right, offensive rookie of the year. We can go pretty quick through this one because you're not going to be betting Brock Bowers, huh?
Yeah, tight end's number 1, sadly. Since 2000, this is the position count of how often they've won. Quarterback 10 times, running back 9 times, wide receiver 5 times. So historically, quarterbacks kind of get the leg up in this situation. I just don't know if there's a lot of value in the market, right? Like, you could take Caleb Williams. I get it. You're not getting a huge payout. You could take Jaden Daniels and think that the Commanders are better than we think. I get it. For me, and then you got like concerns of like, does this guy even start the whole season, of like McCarthy or Drake May? So it kind of gets a little hairy there. One of my favorite values, though, just talking about like if I'm going to take a long shot, kind of like Malik Neighbors, 20-1 on DraftKings. Just thinking about the talent profile, a lot of people and some NFL teams had him right on par with Marv or number 1 above Marv. And you're talking about a situation where he faces literally zero target competition, right? So I like that. I looked at our UDK projections to see like what could we get out of this guy. Right now, 135 targets is the median for 85 catches, 1,083 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I think there's a chance where he beats that and goes 90 catches, 1,200 yards, 7-8 touchdowns. Like that's a pretty phenomenal rookie year for a wide receiver. So I think from a value standpoint, Malik Neighbors makes sense in an up-tempo offense with Brian Daboll.
Yeah, Garrett Wilson, just for context, when he was Offensive Rookie of the Year, had 147 targets, 83 receptions, 1,100 yards, and only 4 touchdowns.
There you go.
So I think the volume can be there. And at 20-1, I agree. I like that. He's behind Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy, who, what McCarthy would need is once he gets in after the bye, presumably, they go on a run. He's just not going to have the same counting stats, but they have to win a ton of games, and you just bet against that kind of stuff. So, I like Jane Daniels and Marv, obviously.
I'm not going to say anything bad about those guys. It's just that I don't think there's a ton of value anymore.
Yeah, and I'm looking down the board. It's like I just can't make the case for Ricky Pearsall.
Can't do it.
Can't do it. Oh, man. Okay, last one we're going to talk about is Comeback Player of the Year. This one also has shifted a little bit over the years. So what is the new guidelines for what this award is this year?
Yeah, so this kind of got some pushback in the public when Damar Hamlin did not win the award last year. The Associated Press came out and they said the spirit of the AP Comeback Player of the Award is to honor a player who has demonstrated resilience in the face of adversity by overcoming illness, physical injury, or other circumstances that led him to missing playing time the previous season. So my TLDR on that is like, if you used to not be good at football and all of a sudden you had an outlier year, you can't win anymore, is kind of my take on what they're trying to say. So, like Russell Wilson, right? Like in theory, he faced adversity last year, but the adversity was his team was just terrible and then he got benched. So he didn't miss time because of injury or whatever.
They don't
so
feel bad that he's accounting for 19% of the Broncos cap.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm not betting on those types of guys. Like same thing with Justin Fields, right? Like he didn't have a major injury that he's coming back from. So at the top of the board, you got, the Achilles boys in Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins. You got Richardson, you got Burrow, all the quarterbacks coming off major injury, Nick Chubb, Daniel Jones. Like those guys make a lot of sense to me. And they all, I think, are priced somewhat fairly. My thing is, I think Kirk Cousins, he's plus 600 on FanDuel. Like, why wouldn't he just be like the same odds as Aaron Rodgers is kind of my take. So if the Jets flame out and the Falcons are good and Kirk Cousins is awesome from the pocket, like he could win. So I only really bet him in this market. Otherwise, I think they're all pretty fairly priced. I guess you can make an argument too for Nick Chubb if he does get back on the field from this injury.
Betting on Kirk Cousins and things going well for the Falcons. That's what you're saying?
I mean, we basically are doing the same thing, right? You're taking Garrett Wilson to win Offensive Player of the Year. You're taking Aaron Rodgers for comeback. You pop those babies in a parlay. No, you can't actually do that. But you're putting those two together. You're taking Drake London Offensive Player of the Year. You're putting him with Kirk Cousins for Comeback Player of the Year. I mean, Kyle, this stuff just writes itself.
The Falcons have Warren Sharp's easiest schedule.
I know, man.
What we were going through them on the main show the other day, and I was like, guys, I don't think you understand how this works. Let me just put this as plainly as possible. I was talking to Andy, Mike, and Jason about it. This doesn't work. This does not work. And, some people don't like to hear that, but if they win the division, they're favorites right now. And, he puts up 4,000 yards and it makes a lot of sense. I think he's just underpriced relative to what Rodgers is. And then if you go further down, Herbert's kind of interesting, but do people think of Herbert as like this, like he messed up a finger and was out like the last 5 or 6 weeks of the year?
Right. Yeah, I don't see it personally.
He wasn't injured enough? Is that what the problem was?
I mean, those guys blew out their Achilles, dude. Herbert had a hurt fingy. Okay, I think he'll be all right.
You get his agent pumping just in the media, just oh, you don't understand. This finger was
you should have
destroyed.
Seen it in the operating room, dude. It was destroyed.
I do like Herbert, and for MVP, I don't know if he'll put up the counting stats, but I think they're a team that's trending towards playoffs this year. They'd have to win the division over the Chiefs, so it's not a great bet. So you're telling me Bryce Young can't win comeback player of the year because he just wasn't good.
I think that's what they're saying they came out and made that official statement, right? It's like, so that's my take, is like, I'm not betting on the guys that had a down year that were healthy. I'm betting on the injury comebacks mostly.
That's going to do it for this episode. Like I mentioned, Betz is going to be out for a little bit. We've got some really good guests. So next week we'll be talking DFS lessons learned. So I'll kind of reflect back from what we did, kind of get you started for the year, and also get to talk through some optimizer stuff. So should be good. Betz, sign us off for a little bit.
It feels like I'm signing off for like the last time ever, but I'll be back. Don't worry, everyone. I'll be back in a month. I'll miss you guys. Enjoy the best ball streets. You might see me in there a time or two, but enjoy the podcast with Kyle and the guests. I'll be listening as well, and I will see you guys in a month. I'll be way more tired than I am right now. See you then.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at thefantasyfootballers.com.